I have been discriminated against all my life because of my golden sister. Now she was trying to walk down the aisle at my wedding, and I finally got my revenge. Ever since I could remember, my parents have loved my sister more. I don't mean in a subtle way. If my sister accused me of something, they would believe it. They would believe her and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe it. Even if there was undeniable proof, they would still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me. In tandem, my birthday cake had to be a flavor she wanted. Hers was not, and my parents always denied knowing. I didn't like that kind of cake. They always bought a bit more for her than for me. We went wherever she wanted, even if it was an event that was supposed to be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me. She just used me as a punching bag. But at first she mostly ignored me. But then it got really bad when we were young teenagers. I'm not sure what the cause and effect is, but she found herself without friends, and her behavior got worse. Did her friends move away? Did they leave her because she was mean? I don't know, because we were never close, and my parents loved to brag about her achievements, but never mentioned any problems. Whereas with me, they loved to bring up any faults I have as material for teasing. I only knew she had none because we went to the same school, and I noticed that she no longer walked around with people. Anyway, she had no friends. I did. I used to be quite popular. My sister suddenly realized that. I stopped being the occasional punching bag for a hated person. She had to take me down all the time. She started accusing me of more things. She accused my friends of more things. My parents stopped allowing me to hang out with anyone. The excuses ranged from her not being a good person, according to your sister, to why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time? What saved me from total isolation was extended family. Most of my family lived in the same town, and I got on well with my cousins, despite some age differences. On one occasion they invited me to something. I don't remember what it was, and I sadly replied that I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. When asked why, I answered that it was because I wasn't allowed to have a friend, because my sister didn't have one. Well, that reached the adults, who apparently tore my parents apart. Later I was scolded for lying and grounded, as if I had anywhere to go, for a month, but after that they gave me some leeway, so it was worth it, and my sister changed schools. I think the humiliation of the extended family, knowing her social status was bad, and she demanded to be transferred, and my parents obliged immediately, even though it cost them more, because the school was further away. But she made friends at the new school. However, she never went back to the school of mostly ignoring me. I guess I felt the power of how much she could mess with me, and the anger that I told the family. She had no friends. She never let me go. My life was still bad. Her friends would come over and bully me, and my parents called it light teasing. I never had friends over, because my parents were terrible hosts to them. Or my sister would accuse them of taking things, and they believed her. But I got close to my cousins, because my parents never dared to do that with the family. And then I had my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home, but my parents insisted. Anyway, one day we were separated, and he came to find me, to tell me that my sister was flirting with him, which he did. She came over in skimpy clothes, batting her eyelashes really badly, and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He got angry and ran off to find me. Of course he did. My sister told my parents a different story, that my best friend had tried to flirt with her instead. But she refused, of course, because how could she? Guess who my parents believed? Well, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I immediately believed him, for an evil reason. But remember, that was back then. I was a teenager and suffering from unfair, bad treatment. I was very resentful and moody, and now hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't mentioned them, because they weren't relevant. My parents were underweight or overweight, and since they liked to show their love through food, giving you more food, buying you treats, etc. My sister is also overweight, whereas I am not. In fact, I've always been kind of skinny, because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, it's not about weight, it's about personality. But my sister was already rude and spoiled. Even her attempts at flirting were bad because she never learned to work for anything, because she could demand and my parents would deliver. On top of that, she didn't look like a sexy model. Even my self-conscious teenage self didn't believe it. My boyfriend would try and cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents forbade me from dating. Such a horrible boy. I tried to carry on in secret, but it was hard and the relationship ended. I got another one, but again my sister accused him of flirting with her. When he refused her advances, again my parents believed her. I tried to point out how this had happened again, but they decided it meant I was incapable of making good choices. And kept choosing bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo Juliet situation and fizzled out again. I ended up being called a slut in high school because I was fine with making out with boys and stuff, but refused to have relationships. Luckily, it never came back to my sister or my parents. My sister did bring home a boyfriend. All this time, he was presented with pride, and my parents spent every telling me how good he was and why. And why couldn't I be like my sister and find someone like him for myself? Until he stopped showing up. And suddenly he was a sneaky bastard. My sister's trick. Oh well. And the unequal treatment continued. She had more pocket money. Her curfews were much better than mine. She could go anywhere at any time, whereas I couldn't. When I pointed this out, my parents would say it was because she was older. But when I reached that age, I still didn't get the same treatment she did. And when I pointed it out, they denied that they had ever said that. They said it was because I couldn't be trusted, as she was. Used my sister's accusations against my boyfriend and friends as proof of my poor judgment. Time passes and it's time for my sister to graduate. She got into a college, not a very prestigious one, and she did not have a scholarship or anything. Again, because I was only told of her achievements. I don't know which colleges she applied to in the first place, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. But I do know that her grades at school were bad, because whenever she got them we would celebrate. I usually got good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, because I always got them. What was there to celebrate? My parents, of course, and told her they'd pay for everything. I was relieved she was leaving. Not that it made my life any easier. She'd come home every other weekend and somehow things were always missing from her room, or some other problem she'd come up with to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict, etc. Eventually my mom came to talk to me about my upcoming graduation. I'm only 1 year younger than my sister. She told me, since they paid for my sister's college, they had no money for mine. They had no money to pay for mine, so it would be better for me to start working right away after graduation and wait for my sister to finish her studies to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, some of the bills and the rent. I pointed out that I could get a student loan. Mom said yes except no. That was because they were so caring towards me, and I had such bad judgment. They would decide whether college was worth debt or not. I'm not sure how they would stop me getting loans, but I didn't ask. There was no mention of scholarships. They had no idea what my grades were, and never believed in my abilities anyway. I didn't bat an eyelid. I just said okay. My mom obviously didn't expect that and kept pushing. Maybe she was hoping I'd throw a tantrum so she'd have an excuse to never, ever pay for my college. But I said nothing except that I understood their position. I thanked them for their concern and that was that. My father tried the same thing later, but I also refused to be emotional. You see, after a lifetime of their terrible upbringing, I never had any expectations about my education. I knew they would find some excuse not to pay for mine and make my life miserable. I never believed that they would eventually pay for it if I worked. I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for university for a long time. I could hardly go out. My friendships were thin, so I had a lot of time to study. And I studied, because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came, and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship. Not to go somewhere like the Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course. At a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing that my sister would hate it and try to stop me through my parents, I put my achievement on social media. At the same time, I told them. I even forced myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't stop me from going, because they'd have to explain to the family why not. First, they were even a bit proud and bragged about it. And then I think my sister got to them, and they even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. Sure I wanted to go. They let it slip that my sister wasn't doing well at college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than I did, I'd suffer worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy, but there was nothing they could do. College was my savior. I started to be happy. I still contacted my parents and visited them on holidays and stuff, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse not going very often because of money. During this time, I avoided introducing them to men, and my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because they would have made a fuss about it again. I moved back home and paid no bills or rent. But it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mom. Obviously thanks to my mom pulling the strings. It was all sold to me as a source of pride. Oh well, almost there, I promise. It was around this time that I met my husband. You know those people who say that if I was in that situation, I would have done something. My husband is the type who really does it. I'm the person who is meek and docile in every situation, and can't sleep at night. Wish I had done something. Thought of something funny to say, etc. I'm the person who can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the one who immediately claps back. He loves drama and he loves to resolve it. He's the type that if he doesn't respond immediately to a slight, you better start worrying. Because he doesn't forgive and forget. He'll only do something worse for revenge. He's the one who wanted me to post here, and wanted to post on a nuclear revenge board. But he decided that what we were doing wasn't nuclear. People were confused. I got together with him, but only because I was incapable. Thanks to my upbringing, probably. Didn't mean I didn't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't do, and treats people well. As long as they do the same for him. When we talked about marriage, we decided that we didn't care much about the ceremony. Because of our budget, as we'd rather spend it on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out, mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown. We decided to do it there. We didn't live too far away either, so we could make some long weekends to get things done, and there was some flexibility in the work, so we could stay in my hometown for a bit. When necessary, we sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. Well, at this point, my parents, of course, demanded to meet my husband. I wanted to grow a backbone and refuse, but I had a hard time. The distance had made me think, maybe my parents weren't so bad after all. Well, my husband looked as if I had canceled Christmas. When I told him I would at least make sure they were never alone with him. See, he had been preparing for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder that he could in his pocket to record everything. He was excited, thinking of all the ways he could reject my sister's advances, insult her, and then distribute the recording of her attempts to my family. So I went alone, unexcited, to meet them, and returned later euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful shit they wanted, babe. We can fuck them up so bad. There are so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to listen to the recording, but he, wisely, told me it was better to listen to him first or else. Otherwise I'd misunderstand him. Well, he went there and instead of flirting, my parents and sister sat him down. After some grumbling about not agreeing with him, my judgment, etc., they agreed to pay for my wedding. On one condition, my sister would be the first to walk down the aisle at my wedding, in a wedding dress. Their excuse was that it wasn't right for a younger sister to get married first. So it was only fair that my sister at least had the experience of it. At my venue, with pictures being taken in the dress, and have a cake later, etc. My husband is going to type his part now. Hey, vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a professional revenge, instant karma. Nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is spurned. That is to say, my wife teehee. She's my wife now. Paints me as this quick-witted guy. I admit my neurons are almost short-circuited when these people suggested that shit. Like some kind of great fucking gift. Even Troy would rather take the horse in a second time. Think, alas. After my brain rebooted, I had a whole less catalog of insults to spew out. But something in my soul was whispering in my, like the devil, string these fucks along. So I said I had to think how my wife, then fiancé, would react. And then I ran out of there before I could reveal my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife. So my husband told me in all sincerity how my parents even wanted my wedding to be about my sister, with a smirk on his face, and had the recording to prove it. I was shocked. Distance had softened how badly they treated me, and I thought even they wouldn't go that far. Fortunately, my husband's insistence on the revenge angle helped me not to go into a bad mood. We had a great time thinking of ways to screw them over. This one, ridiculously outlandish, to what we thought was feasible. We then called his much more level-headed brother. When we settled on a plan, it involved having 2 addresses for the venue, giving them the wrong one, etc. Well, the level-headed brother scolded us for it, while admitting that he would never be able to dissuade us from retaliating. He at least showed us that it would be hard to carry out some of our other ideas. Some of our other ideas also ran the risk of being sued. So in the end we settled for the most benign plan. Act as if we had agreed, but then hire security and don't let them in. Of course, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is mostly my husband's, but he wants me to do the honors, so here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was discussed with me beforehand, and were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents. He said he had researched it and thought I wouldn't agree, but he didn't see the problem and, not wanting the family to break up, he would be happy to help them. He pointed out that I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised by it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of everyone. On the other hand, marriage is a big deal, so who knows if I'll lash out. So he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for things. That way, I would feel even more pressure not to say anything, because not only would we be in public, with our families there, but I'd be grateful for their help, and that would appease me. He said that my parents looked surprised, that my grown-up sister started jumping up and down with joy, literally like a child, so it was accepted as important. My husband also claimed that, because of some poor judgment in boyfriends in the past, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud to use their words against them. I was suspicious of, and liked to check his phone and stuff to make sure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in writing. For any discussion concerning my sister walked down the aisle before me. He went over to her house to talk, and so began the months of deception, during which my parents and my sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I milked them. How well? Rather than pay for the wedding, we then hid. Of course, my parents wanted input in everything. Some things that meant a lot to me, the songs and the color palette. My husband would convince them to let it go, to keep me in line. But since we never really cared about the ceremony in the first place, everything else was game, or so they thought. So what we did was, we'd go and look at the drinks and menu options. and then take the cheapest or second, cheapest option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to try it too. Then we'd say it's a shame. We don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we wouldn't get the best options. My sister would demand that my parents pay for the best. My parents would tell me not to worry. Don't worry, they'll pay for the most expensive. The same thing happened with the photographer's flowers. My husband gave my sister a bouquet of flowers. We would then sadly express that I wanted other flowers. Tasteless flowers. Q. My parents told me they wanted us to have the flowers we wanted, and they'd pay for it. Wedding dress. We hit a little snag here. My parents wanted me to wear an ugly dress. Okay, not really hideous, but it wasn't my style, and wouldn't look good on me. We had planned to say yes and then just not use it, but my mom sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof. I said okay, we had to go. I said no in text and stood my ground. My husband went over and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested to ruin the dress I wanted, so that I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. All this time, they really kept communication outside any text. We made sure it happened by. When my sister tried to send a message to my husband, I have to reply here. This reinforced the uncontrollable and neurotic claims my husband was making, so they believed it and never risked anything in writing. And maybe some people might not like the idea of their partner going around and talking badly about them to their family, but I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painted as this controlling and dangerous bitch extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor. Lol. Oh, and my sister tried to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted. Also, to really sell the fact that he was with them, my husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them that we had hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had seriously considered a courthouse wedding, to concentrate on our honeymoon, to have this extravagant, expensive wedding and hardly spent a penny. We called it payback for emotional damage from my parents, lol. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed it, right? Lowell was enjoying the whole tricking them thing more than planning our wedding. Lowell, I didn't think it was possible to see a man beaming at the thought of wasting his whole Saturday on a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws. But here we are. Soon the day arrived. The plan my parents, sister, and my husband was to wait until everyone was seated. As the bride always comes out late, they would have my sister arrive at that exact time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it, and walk down the aisle. By the time I heard what had happened, it would be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric for my dress alterations, and my husband took it to my parents. My sister still lives with them, and showed it to them as proof that he was going to ruin the dress. Then he said he had to go back to me. I was furious and he had to calm me down. He would see her at the wedding. We made sure to hide our real security. At first, when the guests and my parents arrived, all they could see was a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out the security. We brought out the security, a man who looked like a bodyguard. We told him not to let anyone in, not even my sister, and even agreed to pay him a handsome tip if he didn't give us away. We told him that. Soon the time came. My parents got a text message. My sister was less than 5 minutes away. So my dad went and told people to start. My bridesmaids had been told to follow his lead beforehand, so they obeyed without consulting me. After they had all gone down and taken their places, my dad stood at the entrance as if waiting for me. As this was happening, a friend, who was not in the wedding party, texted me to get ready. This was because if my husband or bridesmaids, etc., took out a phone and started texting, people might notice. This friend was in on the plan. She's my husband's girlfriend, as willing to help create drama as he is, and didn't care about being a bridesmaid or anything. Well, as soon as my dad took his place, the bridal song began to play. The doors opened and I walked in. My dad looked horrified that I was there. He tried to look behind me, but you can't see the venue entrance from where we were. So he couldn't see what had happened to my sister. And then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID and it was her. He just left me there mumbling something had happened. There was gasping and confusion all around. The friend who was there asked loudly what had happened. I lied and said in a tearful voice. He told me I wasn't supposed to be there. That's not what he said. But my husband and I agreed that if he dared to leave me, I should say that to make him look as bad as possible. As for the tears, I wish I could say it was just my excellent acting. But no, despite everything, part of me didn't think he would leave. As far as leaving me there, that the sister thing wasn't true, but an elaborate joke. I don't know. I was hurt, I still am. So I really tried not to cry. The friend then left loudly. What did he mean it shouldn't be you? So that as many people as possible could hear it and spread it. Then one of us said, I'll go and see. We decided to do this to get them to create. To hell with security. And stop my dad from coming back. And stop the ceremony or something. At some point my mom left too. At that point, my husband's father quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been warned that he might have to do this. Seeing him run frantically to me made me smile. I walked down the aisle to a whisper. As people discussed what had happened, some seemed to have gone to check too. By the time I reached my husband, though, all was well. He made me feel better. Kidding, my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar. And don't worry. He'd raked them over the coals for what they'd done. Lol, we got married without a hitch. My parents didn't come back. I noticed that a lot of people left them. They came back during the party, but no one dared tell me what was going on. Someone came and whispered in my husband's ear, and he went out. After a while he came back with a thunderous expression on his face. But he whispered in my ear that he had to go, to hide somewhere before he broke character, and started smiling LOL. Anyway, what happened? It worked. The following is the summary account from friends, family, the security guard and my husband, which I received afterwards. My sister arrived in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in. Because of our agreement, he said she must be in the wrong place, because there was already a bride there. And yes, we gave him a really good tip as promised. My dad went there and tried to threaten him with the police. He claimed he had never heard of him, so he couldn't be working there. The security agreed with the police, since he was hired by us and doing his job. By then my dad realized it was too late, and tried to tell him to let my sister in. At this point the boyfriend came over. He started shouting and insulting my sister, and asked her what was going on, basically stalling. My mom soon arrived and then other people. At this point the wedding plan was off. All my parents could do was damage control, because everyone who found out was horrified. They tried to stop it, screamed and berated her. The three of them, of course, said it wasn't a secret, and threw my husband under the bus. At this point my husband was called in. When he came over, he put on his best look of confusion and denied. Denied. To quote him, gaslight gatekeeper girl boss lol. Denied ever agreeing to anything so ridiculous. When they insisted he demanded proof, and of course, they couldn't produce any. All the text exchanges they could produce were about normal marriage decisions. My sister was screaming, crying and apparently sitting on the floor, kicking her legs like a child. My dad looked like he was going to hit my husband, but security and other people held him back. Of course they did. They said they had no proof, because my husband had told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then he repeated it again. Why would he ever agree to something so fucked up? Tore them a new one about being horrible parents. Then said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lies get in the way of his wedding, and went back to me. No one believed them. The venue had cameras, but they refused to show me the footage, because it was just for security purposes. But some people filmed parts of it. watching my parents and sister being torn apart by anyone who came out to check it out. The drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of things and not believed, watching, it was one of the best wedding presents. My mother cried. My father kept turning from purple to white. My sister was still on the floor crying and screaming. They kept insisting that my husband was in on it. But people kept asking, why would my husband agree? Why was there no proof? Why did they want my sister to do this at my wedding? And they had no good answer to any of this. Finally, they were asked to leave and had no choice but to do so. My father apparently had to pull my sister up, as she refused to leave the floor. Again, nothing was said to me all night. I think they wanted to spare me. Maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest. Yes, for once. But it felt like everyone was going extra effort to be nice, positive and excited about everything. My husband says all that expensive shit they ate. The drinking certainly helps. We had a great time. My husband only kept up the forced angry face for a moment before he broke out and smiled again. Afterwards, we went back to the hotel to get some, before heading off on our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents tried to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought it was risky because they might try to cancel them or something, so we refused. Of course, since this whole thing, the three of them have been trying to contact me. I've refused the calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. I was clever because my sister finally sent me a message. I won't repeat it because it was very confusing and didn't make much sense. But the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced, who had deceived her for months. He wants to print it out and put it on our wall. I laughed and hoped, but was also sure that it had happened, that he was cheating on me. She also suggested that he was cheating on me with her. Actually, my husband took my mobile phone, screenshot of the call logs, screenshot of my sister's message, screenshot of some messages from my parents, demanding that I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family group chat, and sent him screenshots of messages where they were abusing and threatening him. But he continued to be delusional throughout the year. I never agreed to anything stick, and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message and group chat asking my family for help, as I was now being constantly harassed by them. He begged the family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon. Now that they had failed to ruin my wedding, he then ended with a neat request that they don't share our locations, to stop my parents sending my sister over, and then claimed that he had somehow agreed to pretend to fuck her in our honeymoon suite. LOL. My family assured him that they'd take care of it. In fact, we've been quiet ever since. My husband is a bit disappointed that my sister didn't disobey him, so he could gossip again, while tearing her a new asshole. We'll see if it lasts. All in all, while I would obviously prefer to have a normal, loving family at my wedding, for once in my life, not only did they fail to ruin something meaningful to me, I got them back. Extra info. Do I know why they treat me like this? I've been asked this question many times, so I suppose you all think the same. I've wondered all my life and I still don't know. I tried to ask when I was young, but they denied any difference and scolded me for being spoiled, so I stopped trying. I have thought of so many ways, but based on my observations, I think it's this. I was unplanned. It took them a while to get my sister, so she was not only wanted, but also like a miracle child after such a long time. However, considering our age difference is quite small, I think they didn't expect her to have a child so soon or so easily, and didn't protect her properly, much too soon after my sister's birth, and maybe didn't realize that my mom was pregnant until it was too late. So they were saddled with an unplanned baby while they were still with a newborn, and they're not that well off, so the extra expense probably didn't help. So they resented me, but that's just me guessing. Anyway, I've accepted that the answer doesn't really matter. Whatever they did to me was unjustified. Did they really think it would work? My husband and I have talked, and we have a theory that they never wanted to do this at all. We think my sister threw a tantrum about me getting married first, when she could hardly get dates, and they made my husband a strange proposal, as in they didn't want to pay for my wedding, and didn't think we'd accept, or that it would even look good for them to do it. But by suggesting it and being turned down, they could look like the good guys to my sister while having an excuse not to give me a penny. But then my husband accepted, and they couldn't back out, or risk my sister turning on them.